And James Neighbors has been putting himself out there, his life out there. Everything he is an American out there for this country. And I got a timeout over here. What in the world? Really? Scratch everything I just said. How about that? That's what happens. You know? You gotta roll with the punches. All right? Well, this is a person I spoke of that's a great speaker. She was here last year as well. She is, have you guys heard of Eric Holder? Huh? What do you think of him?
Worthless.
I'm in mixed company.
Huh?
I'm in mixed company. I can't say.
Eric Holder, the old AG, Attorney General of the United States of America.
Traitor.
Well, this lady is the cousin, but she's a righteous American. Babette Holder is the president of the Fredrick Douglass Foundation of Illinois chapter, as well as the Illinois ambassador for Empower.org, with Deneen Borelli, C.L. Bryant, and Tom Borelli, a Freedom Works outreach community relations organizer. Babette is a co-founder of Helist, I hope that, the last civilrights.org, and that is a group of Christian conservative women who are political commentators and advocates for the principles of limited government, individual freedom, and a strong free market. Everybody, welcome Babette Holder.
And thank you, LiberTEA Fest, for having me here. As I said, my name is Babette Holder. I didn't get a choice on the name, nor did I get the choice for the family. As he said, I am the president of Fredrick Douglass Foundation, Illinois chapter. I am also a member of the National Black Pro-Life Coalition, which is composed of such notables and people that I look up to, such as Dr. Alveda King, Catherine Davis, Walter Hoy with Issues for Life, Ryan Baumberger, and many others. I came here last year and I spoke to you all in regards to life. Because in the Declaration of Independence, it states, life before liberty and the pursuit of happiness. This year, I'm going to speak to you about liberty. And you know what? The timing couldn't be any better. We have seen in the last few years, liberty more so under attack from those who want to do right, from those who are usually found to be in the wrong. I'm going to tell you, I would have waved when I got up here, but you know, I didn't want my hello to everyone to be mistaken for the socialist salute. And I do like to say y'all a lot, because you know, Babette just likes to combine words and get it done and say it easy, but I really don't want to be mistaken for pandering for votes to make history, but we'll get around to her story at another time. Our liberty, as I said before, is under attack. We have seen the Alphabet Soup Brigade daily attacking individuals from the FBI, CIA, NSA, AG, NBC, CBS, MSNBC to ABCDEFG, and everyone in between. You know, if you are a conservative organization and you applied for a nonprofit status, you had the IRS targeting you very bluntly. And if you happen to have been a private business owner and you treated all your customers with the due respect that you would ask from anyone else, but yet you decided to, as right of the owner, to refuse service based upon your moral values, you were not only reprimanded, you were shut down, disgraced, and your reputation ruined, and your livelihood in ashes. Today we have those who believe that to get their justice, they will oppress your rights. Today we have a hands up, don't shoot. I'm calling it hold them up. Liberty is in the crosshairs. Don't you dare speak about shrinking government with this overinflated, blood-sucking, parasitic, cronyism, nepotistic, big bloated departments of bureaucracy. Don't dare speak of shrinking big government, because big government is nanny government to many in this country. They are being raised to not only believe that they, when they don't or won't make a way, that the government should provide that way, those jobs, the pay raises, not for merit and performance, but for the time that you put in, the number of years, and a guaranteed pension upon retirement. Don't you dare dream of telling them how your children should be educated and what you want to educate them in your own homes, because we're no longer free to do so. Our children are going to schools where they are seeing the most perverted material that some grown people would never watch or read themselves. Yet they are showing and teaching these children sexual education and confusing and blurring the lines of their gender as young as kindergarten. They have taken over our organizations, the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. But hold them up. It's liberty that's in the crosshairs today. And don't you dare ever talk about the history of who the Party for Freedom was. Because when you bring up the past, you're not allowed to reach back that far. And yet today we are hearing how some still can't overcome because of what went on in this nation, as well as many other nations over 200 years ago, and which was abolished about 151 years ago in the United States. But they still can't overcome. But don't dare go back and tell them that the Republicans and conservatives were the ones who were dying to free the slaves. That the Republicans with the Christians and conservatives before our time were the ones who were bold enough to stand up, including a black man by the name of Fredrick Douglass, to go forth, a free man who would always look over his shoulder in case he's ever snatched back into slavery, and talk to presidents about abolishing slavery and women's rights. Don't you dare give them the true history, because then you are racist. When I came here today and first got here, the first thing that crossed my mind was, well, there's my friend Sean from Oath Keepers. And there's my friend Fred from Overpasses. And there's my friend Timothy Goodcase from Constitution Party, and on from many others. You know what never occurred to me? That I was the only one here at LiberTEA Fest that has a permanent tan.
And you're beautiful.
Well done. Thank you.
You know what it was like? It was like wandering into that family reunion and barbecue and picnic. Well, frankly, with my last name, I'm not feeling that comfortable right now, being the only one. I liken myself to Alex Keaton from the show Family Ties, with the two hippie liberal parents as he's running around advocating for Ronald Reagan. Here's Babette Holder. friends, what I want to do is I want to encourage you today. I hope my words, I know you can't go out and speak about what I do. You can't address that because there is no dialogue, discourse, polite discourse, because why? First thing you're called is a racist. Well, don't fret because they call me that too. As a matter of fact, I'm a sellout, but I always thought a sellout was a good thing. You know, when the store sold out, or if you sold out of your books and your videos at your booth. I mean, you had a great day. So I'll stay being a sellout. Because at least when I'm selling out, as far as they're concerned, is I'm selling out on the hype, the false hope. And frankly, I'm tired of change. I'm running out of change right now. My pockets are running on lint right as we speak.
Amen.
What I'm buying into is liberty, freedom, and equality and justice for all. Not a segregation, not a division, but a unity as this nation was meant and has always been. See, I don't buy that I need the government to make special concessions. I'm not a fan of AA. And boy, that really gets them. I'm not talking about AA that does well for your health. I'm talking about affirmative action. I want anything I ever achieve and get on my own merits.
Yes.
Is that too difficult? Do you all still believe that today in America, it is possible, regardless of your race, creed, religion, for anyone to obtain the American dream?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. Yes, it is.
Some said absolutely, and someone said no. And I agree with both of them. It's absolutely possible for anyone to obtain the American dream. But what is your idea of the American dream? What defines the American dream? What is enough for you? When is it enough? Right now, it's difficult to obtain the American dream because they let our jobs go overseas. The only thing I want coming across that border without being vetted is to bring back our jobs. That's the only thing I want coming across the borders unvetted. They didn't ask us when they took them over there. It is possible, I believe, for those to attain, to prosper, to grow, to be educated, without feeling that every institution in this nation is systemically racist. I'm going to tell you, I've worked for everything I wanted in my life. My parents were what you call blue dog Democrats. And they raised us to work. They owned their own business. I grew up in a construction blue-collar family. And if you borrow $10 from my father, my mother was an accountant. She would calculate the interest rate it took that you owed for the time it took you to pay back that $10. Now, some of you are saying, well, wow, that's really rough. No, you know what? It gave me an appreciation. It also taught me, live within your limits. Know what your limits. Don't overborrow. Don't expect someone to give you something and you don't pay it back. And don't expect, just like our government, they thought they were getting some free health care, y'all. Well, how many exchanges have went down? How many insurance companies have you read in the papers this year that said this is not sustainable? Yep. We got Aetna, we got Blue Cross, just to name two. Aetna's talking about rates that are looking like my mortgage payment, and I was one of those people who bought a house when there was no 100% financing, so we did the right thing. We did it the right way. We made sure we bought what we could afford. But that common sense is missing today. And if you try discussing it with those who have the permatans I do, you're a racist. You can't understand just how hard it is for someone who is black. You just can't understand because, no, you don't go through the same struggle. And by the way, more white people are killed by police. But they don't want to hear that. Because I guess, you know, when incidents go down with the police, it's got to look like them. There's an agenda there. That's right. There is an agenda. You know what? I just want to close and say, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., because God knows, we say something now, it becomes plagiarism. You can't even say how much you admire and love your husband because Stanley Ann's fetus and his crowd gets credit for everything. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend anyone, but that's what they call a child, an unborn. It's a fetus. And if you guys don't know who Stanley Ann is, just Google it. Her son has the initials of BHO. It's just easier. I have a dream that one day we won't have, on average, 870 black babies aborted every day in the United States. And regardless of race and color, around 3,500 a day. That's 3,000, about 500 every single day in the United States alone. I have a dream too that one day I won't turn on the news or read the newspaper and see that as of today, from January to August, that we have had over 2,260 people shot in Chicago, and over 400 are dead. And many of those are the young. And I have a dream, my friends here at LiberTEA Fest, that one day we'll stop referring to people by their race, color, creed, religion, but by the fact that they are just Americans. You know, Chris Ann, she gives a great speech about the amendments, and I'm going to say this, and the Bill of Rights, one of my favorite amendments since 1989, and there's a reason for that, because as far as I've known in my lifetime, one of the best presidents we ever had left office in 1989. It's the 22nd Amendment. Thank God for the presidential term limits. 1 Corinthians 16:13. Stay encouraged, be vigilant, never let your voices be suppressed. Stand firm in faith and be men of courage. Never let them suppress you. They can call you racist. They can declare that America will never, ever be justice, but some folks' justice just isn't justice. It's not equality. And come November, Barack Hussein Obama and your agenda carrying forth Comrade Clinton, let's be clear. November is around the track, and I know you can hear that train roaring. And in the honor of Barack Obama,
Everybody, Babette Holder. Give it up. That's a great American right there. Unlike her cousin. Her cousin ought to be in jail. Can I get an amen to that?
Amen.
That's right. All right. Now, do I have any changes to the schedule there, lady? Before I start talking about somebody? All right. Everybody, I already mentioned, you heard about Overpasses for America, and they started on August 6th, 2013. which was 2 years of the anniversary of right here, this blue tarp, Extortion 17. Now, how many people know of Extortion 17? Raise them high. I see somebody back there waving both hands. If you do not know about Extortion 17, make sure that you go to YouTube and check it out. Put in Charles Strange as the name on the search, or just the name of Extortion 17. Because it's bigger and broader than Benghazi before Benghazi. And there's a reason why when they had a hearing about it, that they wanted to put it on C-SPAN 3. You can also go to, and I'm going to have a cheap plug right here, livetruthradio.com, and go to the Extortion 17 tab to check it out. Please go over, if you wish, go over to my tent, which I didn't know I was going to have today. Like I was telling you before, it's been God-led. It's the one with all the signs on the bottom and all the different flags. The third one over, the last tent right there. Pick up a card. Pick up a Constitution. Pick up something of Abraham Lincoln right over there on the table. But our next guest, he's been told he speaks really well. And I've heard his speech. I wasn't there for it, of one of his most dynamic speeches that he gave at the Healing and Reconciliation of the Races in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. But I want to hear it now. And he's still sitting down over there. I don't know why. He knows that I'm going to be calling his name. He should be marching his butt up here so he's over here when I get done calling his name. He's the one with the cowboy hat, putting on his shades. And he's walking this way. He is the president of Overpasses for America, who has been standing up, speaking out, and getting involved for many years. If you go to overpassesforamerica.com, o4a.org, or just overpasses.org, you can find all sorts of news items there to generate and absolutely add to that gray matter that you have. Everybody, James Neighbors.
Well, there won't be any pacing back and forth to while I rant and rave up here. That would be a little dangerous. How anybody could follow up Chris Ann Hall successfully is beyond me. She amazes me every time I hear her speak. Let's give everybody give Chris Ann another round of applause for just inspiring everybody. Now, as Brian mentioned, it was August 6th, 2013 when we had our first rally. It was actually June 13th of 2013 where I first set up the Facebook page for Overpasses for America. And honestly, I didn't have a clue. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how we were going to do it, except for I knew that I had seen this little bitty newspaper article out off the West Coast about these guys that had gotten up on an overpass, and I'm like, well, that'd be a great thing to do if we could spread that everywhere, because you can't miss it. You can't miss that, and it's such an old school idea that nobody will ever forget it, because nobody hardly watches, television commercials. Nobody watches television commercials, but who's going to forget those guys on that overpass? Well, it was one of the, it's been the most amazing thing that I've ever had anything to do with in my entire life, and the inspiration did not really come from that newspaper, because I don't ever read California newspapers. I was led to that by our creator. I was inspired for that because the net result of what it's done so far has been spread the word of liberty out across this country. It's empowered people, and that was the thing. The reason that it started to begin with is because I felt powerless. I felt powerless, and I knew that if I did, that I was not the only person out there. I felt like I didn't have a voice. There's 320 million people in this country, 320 million people in this country, and I'm one. I'm a grain of sand on the beach of humanity in America, and I felt like I didn't have a voice, but I knew there had to be a way, and it started. And every time I think about it, I feel humbled that I was the one chosen to bring to spread this idea, and without everybody, people such as Fred and Terry and Babette and everybody else that's been involved with it, we just couldn't have done it. It wouldn't have happened. But we've got a problem. We have a continuing problem in this country, and it shows again. And it was kind of one of the reasons I started this whole thing was. And, Chris Ann Hall touched on this earlier. We're all looking for a Messiah. We're looking for a political Messiah or a Superman. And we waited, and I 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 waited. And they never showed up. And I'm going, where is this guy? I mean, they showed up in 1776, but where are they now? And then it finally dawned on me. It dawned on me. The heroes that we're looking for are not going to be found out there somewhere. They're not going to be found out there somewhere. They're going to be found when you look in the mirror in the morning. There's a phrase that my mother used to tell me a lot, and it was, one can't never did anything. If you say you can't, you've already failed, because you can do it. You may not know how. You may not know how, but if you are determined to get something done, as long as you say it will happen, it will happen. It may not happen on the timetable you want, but it will happen. But you can never say die. You can never surrender. But if you're looking for the Superman, if you're looking for the hero, you already know that hero, and you see it every time you look in the mirror in the morning. And the only way that this will get done is if we all say to ourselves, and we convince others to do it, is if it is to be, it is up to me. You cannot count on anyone else to get what you think in your heart needs to be done. Now, you may go and inspire other people to do the same thing, but if you want to get the ball rolling, you have got to be willing. You cannot expect other people to be heroes. You cannot expect other people to be heroes. You are the hero that the world is looking for. You just don't know it yet. This nation is truly standing on the precipice. If our founding fathers were here today, I suspect they would already be shooting.
Yeah, they would.
But none of us wants to go there, none of us wants to go there. Nobody wants to go there. But we have fallen so far from the original intention of this nation that the United States has become an abomination to the vision of the founding fathers. We are no longer the nation that was intended, and it's because of us. As Chris Ann said, our government is a reflection of the population. If the government is a reflection of us, if we continue to re-elect the same people, how can you expect anything to get fixed? I was once told that one definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing, but yet you expect a different result. Well, if you can pull that off, I'd like to see how. But what's got to happen is we have a cancer. We have a cancer in this country right now, and it's called our government, and it's not just the federal government. Everybody likes to point the finger. Everybody likes to think that if we just elect that one magical guy, he'll save the day. He will save the day. Well, it's not going to happen. If we keep sending the same people up there, we will continue to get the same results. The only way that we will fix this country in the long term is we have to fix it here. Not in the state capital, not in the federal capital, but here. Because if you fix it here, if you fix it in Springfield, well, when the next guy that goes to decide to move up to a higher level of office from Springfield, well, you know who that guy is because you put him in there because he's a new one. It's a different one. If you keep putting the same ones in there, you're going to keep getting the same results. We have got to overturn every one of our politicians from the school board all the way up to the federal government. And until we purge the cancer that is the corruption that goes all the way from the city council all the way up until Washington D.C. until we purge that cancer by putting new people in there that understand what this nation is about, we will continue this decline into tyranny. We are already in tyranny. Don't let anybody ever fool you to think that we're not, because we are. Every new government regulation is a freedom lost. Every penny of tax that goes onto every dollar you earn is 1% of freedom that you have lost. Because if you can't determine what you do with your labor, then you no longer have that freedom. If your money is taken away and determined how it will be spent by other people, they have decided how you will exercise your freedom, because money does talk. We are, well, for now, still a capitalist society. And money talks, and your money is the fruits of your labors. And if you hand away that to other people to determine, you have no right to complain when it's not spent right. The only thing we can do is to cut it off. People complain about the schools and the Department of Education and the EPA and everything else that the federal government brings in. But the reason your state doesn't stop it is very simple. They're addicted. Just like a meth head will steal from everybody they know. They will break into houses and take anything of value they can find and go pawn it off so they can go get another rock. The same thing goes on in our local governments, in our state governments, and everywhere in this country that the federal government will send funding to. The only way that your state, that any state, can ever be sovereign again and can tell the federal government to kick rocks and get out is to wean themselves off of the addiction of cash that comes out of Washington, D.C. The only problem with that is convincing people that they're going to have to do without some of these special little programs. People have gotten so accustomed to the government patting them on the behind and telling them that it will all be all right. We'll take care of this issue, but it's going to cost you some money in taxes, and then they send it back. So until we can wean our local and state governments off of the federal tip, the addiction will continue. We have to make our states sovereign again, and the only way you can do that is through fiscal responsibility. We have to do that, because as long as the federal government can blackmail the state and local governments with that almighty dollar, we will never be free from the federal government, and they will always have the authority or the sway to tell us how we are going to live our lives. And until we get rid of that, it will never change. We're going to have to learn to do without some of these things that the government does. It's just the way it is. But that's called freedom. When the government's not telling you and determining how you're going to do things, that's called freedom. It means you get to decide. You get to make a choice. But as long as you are addicted to that dollar that they're sending you, you will always be their slave. And we have to convince our state governments and our local governments that they can't come up with a new program every time a new problem shows up, or an old problem that they suddenly decided they wanted to deal with, or when they create something that they call a problem that suddenly it wasn't a problem before, but now they want to spend more of your money so they can increase their addiction to the federal government. That is the root of the problem. Money is the root of all evil, and money, those roots have gotten deep into this entire country. But what we've got to do what we have all got to do is we've got to stand up. We've got to speak out, and we have got to get involved. You may not know how, and that's fine. But there is a way, but you have to make that decision. You may have to change some ways that you think, some things that you believe. In my 20 some odd years ago, I actually thought that universal health care would be a good idea. And then fortunately, I got some sense before, I was able to vote for anything like that. And realize that the more the government is involved in something, the worse it gets. When's the last time you saw a government program that functioned the way it was supposed to? Never. None of them work the way they are supposed to. None of them ever have, and they never will, because they don't care. They don't care. They're not personally invested. You are personally invested in that. So we have got to get involved, and we've got to start trimming these things back. But the biggest thing we have to do, and this is alluding again to some things that Chris Ann Hall was talking about, we've got to change the minds of these people, of the American people. They have become accustomed to living in a welfare state, to living in a nanny state, to having the government take care of all the little things that we would normally do ourselves. We've become addicts to somebody else taking care of our own problems. And until we can be responsible for ourselves, none of this will end. I'd really like to see this whole country become more involved, but it's going to be up to all of us here. We, you and I, have got to be the ones that wake this country up, because they're not going to wake themselves up. They don't want to wake themselves up. They don't even, most people don't even understand what the problem is. And a lot of people don't want to know. Nobody likes to get out of their comfort zone. Nobody likes to get out of their comfort zone. You get into a spot, you feel comfortable, and you want to stay right there where it's warm and comfortable. You don't want to get out of that warm and comfortable zone. But outside of that nice little spot you've got is called reality. And reality is not a nice place. It doesn't care about you. Life, it just doesn't. And the sooner we can accept the fact that we are responsible, and we have got to teach other people to do that for the saving of this nation. You and I are responsible for saving this country. If we don't do it, who else will? If you don't do it, who else will? Can you guarantee that your best friend will put everything that you would put into saving this country? No. The only thing you can guarantee is what you will do. That is the only thing any of us can guarantee, is what effort you will put in. And when you put that effort in, and you push yourself harder than you ever think you can, or maybe even harder than you think you ought to, because nobody else will do it. But if you don't choose to push yourself to your limits, to get yourself out of your comfort zone, and to wake people up around you, until you choose to do that, nothing will happen. Because when you choose to do that, you will inspire others. Now, they may only do one little thing, but that's 100% more than they were doing before. Even if every single American, 320 million people, did one thing a day for this country, we would transform this nation back to what it was originally intended. One thing a day to restore this nation, even if it's just to tell somebody what is really going on, what our real freedoms are, even if it's to hand out a constitution and ask them, have you ever actually read this? I would bet you that most people that you know have never actually read the Constitution, or if they have, it has been so long that they don't remember it, or they just glazed over it and never really paid any attention to begin with. If we don't understand the foundation of this nation, how can we defend it? It's just like apparently not. It's kind of like, well, if you want to be a Christian, kind of helps to know what it qualifies, and reading the New Testament would be a good idea. So if you want to follow the tenets of Christianity, you're not going to go read Dr. Seuss. You're going to read the Bible. If you want to be a good American, you pretty well need to read the Constitution, because if you don't get it. You don't understand if you don't know what the Founding Fathers intended for you. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance will get you killed, and ignorance is going to be the death of this nation. And we have got to educate ourselves and others. I wish I could memorize the entire Constitution, but my memory doesn't work that way. But
I got a copy I can give you.
I've got several, thank you. But we really do. We have got to get involved. You know, a lot of people have asked, or have just straight up said, well, what you do out there on those overpasses doesn't make any difference. And they're wrong. They're wrong. For one, you change every sign. It's like the butterfly effect or the ripple effect. One person, you are out there. You are a little ripple, and you think you're not doing anything. Or maybe you do, because you are. But you never know if the next person that sees that message is going to be the next Thomas Jefferson, or if they're going to be the next George Washington, or the next Benjamin Franklin. You don't know that, and you may never find out. But that's not the point. The point is you're out there to wake those people up. The Thomas Jeffersons and the George Washingtons and the Benjamin Franklins, they never imagined that they would be the founding fathers of a nation when they were first born. Not a one of them did. Not a one of them did. And none of them wanted to do what they did. They just wanted to live under a just government, but they knew it was not going to happen, and that's when they said, if it's up to me, if it is to be, it's up to me. And then they found other people that were like-minded that also said the same thing. They believed in the same thing, but they all believed if it is to be, it is up to me. And then they found more people like that had the same ideas of liberty and freedom, that said, if it is to be, it is up to me. They didn't count on anybody else. They didn't wait for Superman to show up. They didn't wait for a Messiah to save the day, because they knew when they looked in the mirror, the hero was right there. God gave every single one of us that spark of divine. And we can all be as great as we choose to be. And we can all change the world if we choose to do so. For good or for ill, we can all make this, we can make the difference. The problem is we've got too many people that are doing it for themselves and not for the good of everyone. It's going to be the tireless minority of patriots that will save this nation if it is to be saved. But we cannot rest, we cannot pause, and we cannot expect reinforcements. We are it. If you get somebody else that comes along and joins you in your cause, rejoice and thank God. And I mean that literally, because they were inspired to join you, because liberty is a holy cause. It is a holy cause. Liberty and freedom is inspired by God. It was given to us, and it's up to us to honor what that gift is and to defend it. And it doesn't mean to defend it by being politically correct and never hurting feelings. You do have to be honest. You have to be scrupulously honest in the things you say to people, because credibility does matter. Credibility and integrity do matter. You cannot lie to people to try to convince them into doing a righteous cause for liberty. You have to be honest, but that does not mean you have to be polite about it. Amen. We have got to quit worrying about offending people when we tell them that you are wrong. Because I've been wrong, and I've been thankful. I'm actually thankful when people point out that I'm mistaken in something, because at that point where I realized that I am mistaken, I became that much more powerful. I became that much more wise, and in doing so, it improved my ability to help other people be free. And so don't be afraid of criticism. Don't be afraid to be proven wrong, because everybody's wrong and we're all going to make mistakes. But you have to move on, and you have to continue. You have to continue going on, and until we either have liberty or we have death. And I will never, and I don't think anybody here will ever surrender to the tyrannical nation, the tyrannical government that we have right now in this country. But the fact of the matter is, we have to stand up. We have to do something. Nobody is going to do it for you. And if they do, they can dictate terms. And nobody should dictate terms to another human being. We are on the precipice. This nation is on the precipice. We are not special as far as human beings go. America is, however, the exception in history, because all throughout history there was tyranny after tyranny after tyranny after tyranny after tyranny, and an America came along. And an America came along. On that beach of political history, one grain of sand appeared that gleamed brighter than the rest, and it was America. But that ocean of tyranny is trying to wash us back into the ocean of time, where we will be forgotten. And we cannot allow that to happen. We cannot allow that to happen. How many thousands of years and how many millions or billions of people were born, lived, and died under tyranny? Everybody until the United States. For the last 250 years, the United States has been the exception to the rule of tyranny. If we let it die, if we let this nation fall, if we let freedom collapse under the oppression of tyranny, how long will it be until it rises again? We cannot expect other people to keep the flame alive. We have to guard that flame, that precious candle light of freedom, against the winds of evil, because they are going to try to blow it out. And they are so close now. They are so close now. We have to guard this zealously with everything in our being, because we cannot account on somebody else to do it. You have to assume that you are the last living patriot and act accordingly. And when you find others that believe the same way, you've just doubled your chances of succeeding. And then you just continue, and you keep finding more and more people that think like you, just like the founding fathers did. And people say, well, what good does that protesting do? What good does that protesting do? And why are you even out doing it? And it's like, well, I don't know. Why don't you ask the founding fathers what the effect of protesting is? Where do you suppose all those people came from? They came from the ranks of those protesters. So if you're looking for people like that, if you're looking for people with the audacity to stand up, you go look to the people that are willing to stand up, speak out, and get involved. And I had no idea that it had gone on so long. So thank you, everybody, for being patient. But here's Brian again, and just keep the light burning, people. We are it. This generation will determine whether America lives or dies. Not the next, and not the one before us, but this generation.
Everybody, James Neighbors, and Bill Ward over here is going to play one song. It's going to be a short song, but a meaningful song. And then we're going to have Mr. Stufflebeam come up here. Did I pronounce it right?
Okay, here we go.
Bing.
My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Our fathers, God, to thee, author of liberty, to thee we sing. Long lay our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God, our King.
All right, beautiful. Bill Ward. Now the next speaker is from Constitutionally Correct. His name is Randy Stufflebeam. Is that right?
You got it.
I got it. Hey, first time. Come on over. Come on over.
Although I might be.
Shit. Batteries.
Well, it's kind of funny. My wife, as she saw this little cubicle here, she's like, what are you going to do? Because normally I don't do well in enclosed spaces. I need to expand, I need to walk, I need to talk, and so I feel a little bit trapped up here. Hey, I want to tell you, all of you who are sticking around, thank you very much. God bless you guys. And I guess I need to get this mic more in my face. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Get closer.
Yeah, normally I don't need a mic, but there's a lot of ground to carry. The first thing I want to mention, though, is, I see the Oath Keepers and the militia here, and many other different groups. And a couple of different groups were mentioned up here. The guy who was speaking from a long distance, through the telephone. What was he? The Liberty Restoration. We've got all of these liberty groups around here, and I want to say thank you for the things that you're doing. But sometimes I want to say, though, that we tend to get into our little group and think we are the only answer. And I want to say that we are united, and that's the beauty of this Liberty Fest tonight, is really to unite all of our efforts, because it's going to take all of our efforts to make this happen, to reestablish liberty, the liberty that we know is eking out of this country almost faster than I can talk. It takes all of us, and it's not just from one perspective or another, but I dare say, though, it does take an education. It does take to know what we are all about. And let me suggest, or maybe acknowledge, or at least say, here's the deal. We've heard people talk about it being a Christian, and we, hear that people a lot of times call themselves Christians. But I dare say that 99.9% of the Christians that say they're Christians have never even opened up the manual that says, here's what a Christian's all about. The Bible. Because I hear Christians talk about stuff all the time that I'm like, you didn't find that in the Bible. Well, guess what? We have the same situation with Americans. 99.9% of the Americans who say they're American have no clue as to what's in our Constitution. And I am finding that even among those who have a little bit of a modicum of understanding of what is in the Constitution, that even they are not well aware of what all is in our Constitution. I'm going to ask about a definition here. How many of you know what a bill of attainder is? Raise your hand. I see one. Nobody else? Okay. How many of you have your little pocket constitutions? If you don't have one, run over to the Constitution Party tent or wherever they've got them distributed. Grab one, because I've got to point out something to you. All right? Article 1, Section 9. Go ahead and pull it up, folks. Article 1, Section 9. Section 9, Article 1, Section 8 is for Congress, the dues. Here's what Congress is supposed to do. Article 1, Section 9 is the ones that, here's Congress, here's things you are not supposed to do. And look, if you've got this version on page 8, the second one down there says, no bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. Okay, folks, what the bill of attainder is, in the old Great Britain, it used to be that they could pass a law that Randy Stufflebeam is guilty of sedition and he is going to pay by death. The legislators could pass a law that Randy Stufflebeam is guilty of sedition and we're going to execute him at high noon. Attainder is the form of the word to taint. That means by law, they could taint somebody as being a criminal. According to the Constitution, no bills of attainder shall be passed. Now, we've heard people mention the NDAA, especially the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012. How many of you have ever actually read the text? Anybody? A few of you? I've read the text, and I can tell you within the text of that piece of crap for a bill, that it says that our government officials can arrest us with nothing more than saying, we think you're a terrorist. Totally violating the Constitution. It is a bill. And I suggest to you, it is a bill of attainder that takes people based upon somebody's opinion. Not based on the law. Not based on the Justice Department. It's an absolute, complete violation of our Constitution. And how many of you knew that it was in there? I'm not here to make you feel guilty. I'm not here to anger you. I want to challenge you to fully understand the document that makes us American. We need to understand what's in here. I would even challenge you, how many of you know who it is that's responsible, who constitutionally is responsible for appointing the officers in our Army? Who's responsible according to the Constitution?
Congress.
I heard one person say it, but he's heard my speech before.
Couple times.
Article 1, Section 8. Let's take a look at it, folks. Article 1, Section 8. And in the middle of page 7, it says to exercise, this is the power of Congress, to exercise exclusive legislation in all, let's see, wait a minute. Did I read the right one? No, it's the one above, excuse me. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. The one above it. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States. Even if the militia is employed by the government of the United States. And you got to understand that the militia back in the days of the Founding Father were supposed to be run by who? The states. In fact, what does the Constitution of Illinois say the definition of a militia is? Who's the members?
We all are.
Well, not all.
Able-bodied.
It does qualify.
All the able-bodied.
All able-bodied persons in this state are members of the militia. All right? So, but let's just look at this a little bit further. What does the next clause say? Reserving to the states, respectively, the appointment of officers. All right, folks. Even those militia that are in the national, employed by our national, in our army, they are to be appointed by the states. Does anybody know why? I thought you was going to raise your hand. The reason, folks, is because our founding fathers were absolutely petrified of a central government having the power to move the army, the military forces against the people, against the states. They had this absolute aversion for it. So they said even if they were employed by the government of the United States, the officers are to be appointed by the states. Because he who gets to make those appointments has the loyalty, right? How many of you have heard of people asking, what if you were asked to shoot against your neighbor or something like that if they were doing stuff? They've actually passed that around, folks. If they were answerable to the states, we absolutely know what that answer is. So it's important it is absolutely important that you understand this Constitution. Not just say I uphold it. I made an oath 22 and a half years. Well, for 22 and a half years in the Marine Corps, I had an oath to support and defend the Constitution. But I will tell you, during that time, I had not a clue. I did not know what this Constitution is, and yet I was willing to lay my life down on it. I made an oath for it. And I didn't know what it was. It wasn't until after I got out of the Marine Corps that I discovered what the Constitution was and how both the political parties have betrayed my service to my country. And for those of you who have served, they betrayed your service by violating this Constitution. All right, now I'm going to get to my topic. That was just my intro. Hope you all are fired up.
Precursor.
Shall we have a word of prayer? All right. The year tyranny got its foothold in America. We have heard about, in fact, even James had mentioned a little bit about, we need to take back our government and get off the government dole. But do you know why we're on the government dole? It's because the government has a dole that they're not supposed to have.
1913.
Our Constitution said that Congress was authorized to lay and collect taxes. But prior to 1913, no such thing happened with our income tax. There are three major things that happened in 1913 that allowed tyranny to get its foothold in America. The first was the 16th Amendment. The 16th Amendment is mostly what you would recognize as the income tax. Prior to 1913, there was no such thing as an income tax. The income tax has been even challenged to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's answer is, well, there's no new tax authorized by the 16th Amendment. What? The courts themselves were protecting our wages as being a source of income that could be taxed by the federal government prior to 1913. But once the income tax amendment was passed, there's four things that were violated. But before that, there's the second thing was the 17th Amendment. And the third thing was the passing of the Federal Reserve. Now, within the 16th Amendment, there's four constitutional principles that were destroyed by the 16th Amendment. The first thing it says is that they can tax our income without regard to source. Prior to 1913, our wages were not a source of income that could be taxed. In fact, it was looked at as being a trade for labor, not a source of income. But nowadays, if they decide that looking at the moon for a couple of hours a night is worth an income, or they can put a value on it, guess what? They can tax it. And it doesn't take a stretch of imagination to see that they actually are doing that. It says they can tax us without regard to apportionment. They can completely disregard apportionment. Article 1, section umpty front. Can't think of it, but you can look it up. It's there. And if somebody wants to challenge me, that would be great. Go ahead, give her a challenge. But it says that they can tax us, but all taxes had to be, they could directly tax us, but they had to be apportioned. Now, I actually looked up the word apportioned. Anybody know what that means? Well, it means the fair distribution based upon, and this was the one that really was the kicker when I looked at it, based upon representation. So the second thing that they have violated, according to the Constitution, was it used to be, prior to the 16th Amendment, that all taxation had to be apportioned. That apportionment was based upon representation. Now, there's two other additional things that are destroyed, and they're both very similar. It says they can tax us without regard to a census or an enumeration. Now, let me ask you, what's the purpose for a census or an enumeration? Anyone?
To know how many people are in each community.
Bingo. The purpose for an enumeration is to know how many people they are, so we know what the basis of representation is. Most of the time when I ask that question, it's so they know how much money to tax us. No! It's a basis of representation. Now think about this, folks. The 16th Amendment says that our federal government can tax us without regard to apportionment, which has a basis in representation. Remember that. Number 2 and 3 there with the enumeration and census, the basis of representation. Think about this for a second. Why was this country established? Why did our founding fathers come to this country? They came because of religious liberty. Why did we go to war? Why was the Revolutionary War fought?
One of them, taxation without representation.
There it is, taxation without representation. Our founding fathers so despised this concept of taxation without representation that they went to war. Do you understand that? Anybody here ever been to war? You've seen death, you've seen carnation. They went to war and they killed people over the idea that we're being taxed without representation. And I dare say we've got it in our Constitution. It's been passed. It is now part of our Constitution that they can tax us without representation. The very reason we declared independence from that god-awful country, England, right? Think about it, folks. And then, it was important to note, why was the 17th Amendment passed? Anybody know what that one is? It changed who our senators are elected by. Prior to 1913, our senators, those two that represent us in the federal government, were elected, appointed, or however they decided to by the state legislatures. Prior to 1913, we actually had state representation. People wonder why we've lost our state sovereignty. It's because we no longer have anybody representing the state. We have representatives of representing the people. But guess what? We already had congressmen. In fact, how many of you have ever heard of the Great Compromise? A lot of you heard about the Great Compromise. Well, do you know what that was all about? Was that it was all going to be a government based upon the representation of the people. Now, it was kind of a good idea. Madison came up with, all of a sudden, Rhode Island and some of these other smaller states said, oh no, we'll never be represented in this government if we don't have equal representation. And so they thought we almost didn't have a constitution because of this one single issue. Those smaller states were ready to leave, and they're like, hey, we're just about to fail. What can we do to keep them here? And they came up with the Great Compromise, which split the House into a bicameral House. The lower house, interestingly, representing the people, not the upper house, the lower house, and the upper house representing the states. And guess where all bills of revenue are supposed to start? In the House, not the Senate. But the Senate can make proposals and decide whether they want to pass it or not. In other words, every revenue bill, every bill that comes out of the House has to pass through the basis of the states. States have the final key. It was our check against an overbearing federal government. We could call them in. We could say, hey, Senator, you will vote against that. Oh, we're not declaring war because we're not coughing up the troops. There's another connection that you need to be aware of. So they understood those powers that be. And by the way, does anybody know when the impetus for the things that happened in 1913 actually got its big dream and big get-together?
Jekyll Island.
I heard it.
Jekyll Island.
Jekyll Island. In fact, on Constitutionally Correct, the very first interview I ever did was G. Edward Griffin, the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. That was my very first interview, and it was a week-long interview, and I'm telling you, it was a phenomenal interview. That happened. They got the plans in 1910, and they implemented it in 1913. And then, of course, at the end of the year, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. Those three things, folks, you have to absolutely know, were pieces of the puzzle that fit finally together. A lot of people don't understand. In fact, I get a lot of people that disagree with me. Randy, I'm glad I get to have a choice as who's going to be my senator. I don't want the Madigan and all of them to choose our senator. Let me tell you something, folks. I heard, the issue of how can we take back our country and, get rid of the corruption. Well, number one, competition is the answer. We had a competitive government. We had two representatives representing the state that did compete against the government, that said, government, you can't do that because that's a state authority thing. But we lost that when the senators no longer represent the people. We no longer have that. And what's the basis of all corruption?
Power.
I heard power, but what's the basis of all power?
Money.
Money. Money is the basis of all corruption and power. And in the case of having the senators actually represent the states, corruption works in our favor. Huh? Well, what's the basis of all corruption? I want the money in my own pocket. I don't want it to go to that place out there. I don't want them to have the money. I want it in my pocket. Think about this, folks. If the senators still represented us, and let's say corruption, they're all corrupt. Well, guess what? They want the money in the state pocket, not the federal government. They want it here. We would be better off. Corruption actually works in our favor. But no. They knew that the 16th Amendment would not stand if the senators actually represented the states, because the states would then see the money that used to be in the state coffers going into the federal coffers. Okay, so I discovered through all of this that our country has unlimited funding capability. Whatever they don't steal from us, they can print out of thin air. We're screwed, folks, because we've got nothing to protect us. We used to have senators to protect us from that idea. They knew if they saw the money going to the federal government, the states would say, you ain't getting it, and that 16th Amendment ain't going to stand. Folks, we need to know where the basis of where we are came from. But here's the thing. I knew we had unlimited funding capabilities, but how did they get this unlimited spending capability? Where did that? And for years I was perplexed until I read a book by Oliver DeMille called 1913. And in that book, he exposed where they had limited spending capability. In 1936, it was out of the Butler versus the U.S. case. The Supreme Court redefined the welfare clause. Prior to 1936, our courts and everybody else understood that the Article 1, Section 8, that has the welfare clause in there. In fact, Federalist Papers number 41, you can come to my website and read it for yourself. In there, Madison even talks about that everything that is defined in Article 1, Section 8, that welfare clause, is defined by the rest of Article 1, Section 8. That you cannot spend your money on anything that is not found in the dues. Raising and supporting armies, building postal roads, those kind of things are constitutionally correct. What's not correct is having an army standing for over 50, 60 years without a declaration of war. How did that happen? Well, I can tell you how that happened. It happens because our federal government has the money to keep them in place. Because they have this unlimited funding capability where they can unconstitutionally, as I say, but they made it a part of our Constitution by an unconstitutional amendment. I'll say that. An amendment that completely changed the intent of our founding fathers. They have this unlimited funding capability, and guess what? Just in the news, both Obama and Hillary Clinton have funded ISIS to fight this other organization. Folks, we've been doing that for years. Our government's been doing it for years. Don't you think? Here's the thing. How about, who was the president of Iraq? Hussein? Saddam Hussein, thank you. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein, how did he become president of Iraq? Guess what? He was a U.S. supported dictator. We put him there. We funded all of his military efforts to take over Iraq through our CIA. We did that, folks. And then, oh, he's an evil dictator. He's a mean and cruel man. Yeah, we knew that. That's why we put him there, to take control. And now we got to go in there and take him out because he's an evil dictator. We put him there. We put ISIS there. We put all these crooks there. We've got this powerful force that we can spend our money on whatever's for the quote-unquote good of the United States. That's how they termed it. That's how they redefined it. The Supreme Court redefined the welfare clause to say for whatever's for the good of the United States or good for America. And they've even refined it further where it could be for the good of the poor people or for the good of this group of people or for that group of people. We're keeping an army unconstitutionally standing for over 60 years, 70 years now. Since 1940 was the last constitutionally declared war. And how did that war get declared and where did the military come from? It came from the state militias, by the way, that stood up this whole thing. And it was done by state senators who were representing the states that then had to cough up the manpower and the resources to stand up this army to go to world war. Folks, you got to understand how this all came to be because it's all well and good. We could say we're not taking any more of that money. Rick Perry tried to do that in 2008. How many of you remember that? As governor of the state of Texas, he says, we're not taking your bailout. Guess what he did? Now, here's the thing. I concur with him. It's unconstitutional money. There's nothing that authorizes Congress whatsoever in our Constitution to do that. The only way they get this authorization is through these unconstitutional opinions of a Supreme Court run amok. But here's the thing, folks. If we ever want to take it back, there's only one way to take it back. If Rick Perry would have said, we're not taking the money, which I would have agreed with, the only way he could have stood up and said, but neither are you taking any more money from our people. That's the only way it could have happened. Because the government is taking the money from his people. He's got a responsibility to at least try to get a little bit of it back. Yeah, I agree if we could get off that, as I won't quite use the boob of the cow. Yeah, we got our wiener selves off. Yeah, I agree with that. But guess what? They're taking our money. They are robbing us. They're stealing our money in what I consider unconstitutional measures through the 16th Amendment and the declarations of the Supreme Court. Opinions of the Supreme Court. Opinions of just a couple of people are running this country. Folks, I absolutely am 100% in an agreement with the fact that we need to get off of this government doling out. Absolutely. But we also need to take a stand and say, you're no longer going to take our income. And all these other fees. And in fact, you heard Chris Ann talk about the fees for this and the fees for that. At some point in time, folks, we're going to have to understand. But here's the thing. Brian. Yeah, sorry about that, brother.
That's all right.
At least I didn't mispronounce it. So we're even. As Brian talked about the 47 goals of the communists, I actually have those 47 goals listed on my website, in my blog on Constitutionally Correct. It's the 45 communist goals. And Cleon Skousen wrote that book, The Naked Communist. There was a congressman in Florida that actually read it into the congressional record back in 1963. Interestingly, and I'm with you, brother, they pretty well completed all of them. And number 15, anybody want to guess what, now you can't, because I already divulged that to you.
I won't.
Number 15, anybody want to guess what number 15 is of the communist goals?
Disarm.
Okay, Timothy, you've been itching. Goal number 15 says the takeover of one or both of the political parties. And it's my suggestion that they have succeeded. Now, my only disagreement with Cleon Skousen is he points it out to be the 45 communist goals. And while that's true, and especially at the time, the fact is, it's not so much the communist goals, it's the globalist goals. The globalists. How many of you are really familiar with the Federal Reserve? How many of you know how many banks are in the Federal Reserve? There's a banking cartel, by the way, folks. How many of you know what they are? Who they are? There's 8 of them. Depending on who you consider as members of it. Out of the 8 members, only 3 of them have any U.S. interests. The Rothschilds, the Bilderbergs, the Rockefellers, all who control our Federal Reserve. Globalists controlling the U.S. economy. Do you understand that? That a majority of the Federal Reserve are foreigners who don't give a rip about this country. They only give a rip about their interests. And they are using communists. They are using ISIS. They are using the Taliban. They are using all of these other factions across this globe to implement what they are trying to achieve. Global dominance. And as long as America stands as a bright and shining star of liberty, they can't do it. The only way they can do it is to destroy us. And folks, they've got their claws in us. 1913, they dug their claws in. And if we want our country back, we've got to restore liberty through repealing the 16th Amendment, through repealing the 17th Amendment, and repealing that god-awful Federal Reserve. Get it gone.
Amen.
Folks, I do have hope for our country. It seems like it's getting to the point of being hopeless. I do have hope for this country. But we have got to take action. It's got to be action, folks. I've been talking to a lot of people, and they say, well, here's my vote. Here's my vote. Here's my vote. Folks, I need more than the vote. We need more than the vote. We need people to run. And I'm going to tell you, the communists have both parties. Yep. Why do you think? I heard Jim say, hey, we need to dump every single one of them. Well, I'm going to tell you, I know some of them people personally. They went there to do the right thing. They try to do the right thing. But then they get swallowed into the machinery. They get swallowed into that force that's exerted upon them from the globalists. Those who actually control both the Republican and Democratic parties. The only way we are going to be able to take back our country, and to do so on a consistent basis, is to create what I believe is a multi-party system. The globalists have control over the two. My libertarian brothers, even my Green Party brothers, even though I'm diametrically opposed to just about every single thing they stand upon, I believe they should be there. Because then the globalists will have a whole lot harder time having that control. Imagine if we had a multi-party system and it wasn't just a Democrat or Republican that was being appointed to a Supreme Court of the United States. You can take a look back at all of these. I mean, how well did Roberts, appointed by that conservative President Bush, how well did Roberts defend our constitutional rights? One vote, Obamacare stood, and Roberts stood for Obamacare. So you tell me how well that's worked out so well. In fact, you need to take a look. I'm not going to take a whole lot more time, but I do want to read something from Thomas Jefferson that I think is really important here, because it talks about the power of what's happening. In fact, if you look at the Anti-Federalist Papers, which I happen to have the Anti-Federalist Papers on my website at constitutionallycorrect.org, I suggest reading through those, because quite frankly, reading through the Anti-Federalist Papers, you'd have to almost actually declare them to be the prophets of their day. Because everything that they were scared about with the passing of this Constitution has come pass. There's one, I think it was it's like Anti-Federalist number 7, maybe 5, that says if you pass this Constitution, there will be a civil war. Guess what, folks? Yep, we had one of those. So go there, get educated. Here's what Thomas Jefferson had to say. It has long, however, been my opinion, and I have never shrunk from its expression, that the germ of dissolution of our federal government is in the Constitution of the federal judiciary. Did you catch that? The dissolution of our government will be done through the federal judiciary. An irresponsible body, working like gravity by night and by day, gaining a little today and a little tomorrow, and advancing its noiseless step like a thief, until all shall be surpassed from the states, and the government of all will be consolidated into one. Do we not see that happening today? Here's a prophetic statement by Thomas Jefferson. I've got more, but the point is, folks, I believe we can take back our country, but we can't do it the way we've been doing it. We've got to do it from another standpoint. The globalists, you may say I'm a conspiracy theorist, and to that I say I do have a tinfoil hat, and it is lead-lined. There is a conspiracy. Another thing, just because they're out to get me doesn't mean I shouldn't be afraid. Okay, so here's the point. There is a conspiracy by the globalists to create a globalist country and a state, the American state, within a global community. Folks, if we don't understand these principles, let's get off the government dole. But how are we going to do that? We got to get the government from taking our money to begin with, so that we're trying to scream and scratch and claw for every little bit to get it back. We've got to accomplish these things. And there's only a couple of ways that we can do that. And one of those, folks, is to stand up and be counted. And I dare say it's not going to happen through the Republican or the Democrat parties. It's been tried. People I know of tremendous character swallowed up by the two-party duopoly. It will only, let me ask you this, how did Germany fall? How did the Nazi regime fall? How was that taken? There were people that stood up on the inside, but it was too powerful and they caved and they were killed. I believe it will only come from the outside, folks. I like what Donald Trump's doing. He's causing a lot of hate and discontent. But guess what? He's in the wrong party.
There's only 2. That's it.
So far, there's only 2.
But
I'm going to tell you that December the 15th, there's going to be an announcement. And I will leave you with that. Have a great night, folks.